with auto insurances. That is still heavily regulated at the state level, but you find more competition in auto insurance than you do in health insurance. De-link insurance from employment. Why is it, I don't get my life insurance through my job. I don't get my auto insurance through my job. Each time I switch jobs, though, I have to change my insurance, my health insurance.
Sometimes that means changing doctors.
That's right. Increased price transparency. So if I go to Dr. A or Dr. B, I don't know which one costs more. If I get procedure 1 or procedure 2, I don't know which one costs more. And I don't care because all I'm paying is that copay. Right. So once I pay my $50 to get in the door, I might as well get everything they'll get me. And they will continue to give me as many services as they can because they don't want to get sued, because they get, in many cases, fee for service. So we have to look at all the mechanisms together and then say, okay, I can't think of another industry where I go in and I don't know how much something costs and I don't know whether it's working and I buy a lot of it. I can't think of a whole lot of. So we have to increase price transparency. We have to increase the market forces. We have to increase the caps on health savings accounts. Right. Why are the caps so low? Why not let me, if I want to put in 60% of my paycheck into a health savings account, why shouldn't I be able to? Yeah. So there's a bunch of these things that we can do that will increase the amount of coverage, or the scope of coverage, that will increase the quality of care because you're not going to have a queuing effect, that will decrease costs in the system, and that don't require the government to get more involved. They require less involvement.
Right.
So it's simple microeconomics. That when you have a functioning market, there should be no government intrusion. When a market isn't functioning as well as it could, there should be minimal intrusion. So you do as little as you can to get things working again.
Right.
Instead, the approach that we've gotten with the healthcare bill and so many other things in this Congress is we're just going to put in this massive thing in place and we're going to hope it works.
They don't even know what it is.
That's right.
What was that quote? We won't
Pelosi's
know what's in. We won't know what's in the bill until it passes.
And did you hear Dodd's quote the other day with the financial services reform? He said, "Well, we'll see how nobody knows how it will work until we get it into effect."
Right.
I mean, on both these massive pieces of legislation, they're essentially saying the same thing.
That's the culture.
That's right.
That's the culture.
And I'll give you an example of the problem with the way the healthcare bill was made. So right now, there's a 2.8% increased tax on medical devices. So as it's written, it applies to prosthetics. Guy goes over to Iraq, loses a leg, comes back, gets an artificial leg, he's taxed on that. Now everybody recognizes that's wrong. Democrats, Republicans, everybody says, you know what, that's wrong, that shouldn't be in there. But it made it through.
Right.
Now why did that happen? If you're making laws the right way, you're never going to have something like that.
How do you have a 2,200-page bill that nobody reads and then you vote on it?
That's right.
Okay, so you're going to make a promise to make sure that these bills are read and everything
Absolutely.
before you? You're going to...
Absolutely.
I mean...
And there's, in the financial services reform bill, there's actually a quota system that's in place on hiring of minorities and to prevent minority and gender discrimination. And it's in this financial services reform bill. And it's actually going to have a huge impact on the financial services industry, but even more important, what does that have to do with the financial collapse that we're in?
Right.
And it's this sort of idea that we're going to just stick in these little parts, nobody's going to notice, and you add a page to a 2,000-page bill, who cares, we'll just throw in this. Well, those little things add up and they make a big difference. And
because everybody in there's got a little something they all have to have their fingerprint in there.
That's right.
That to me, that's part of the problem too. It's like if just take, and I think they just ran through this with our state senator Scott Brown with the banking thing, and one of the
$17 billion tax increase that came in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and then and they hosed him on that. He supported that bill and they snuck it in, and apparently in the end, he got it removed.
Right.
And that's a testament to to the respect he has up there as a newcomer, and and who's backing him.
And the numbers in the Senate.
Right.
All right. That makes a difference.
You don't want the people put him in office to go after you.
That's true too.
And he definitely did a great job. But he had a lot of backing, a lot of people, and he had people from all over the country.
Yep.
Sending them $10 at a time.
And that's what we're seeing. This race has already become it's a national race. We're getting these $10 checks from Oklahoma and California and all over the place, and it's a great thing to see because people care.
Right.
And we're getting these retirees who are sending in and saying, "I'm on fixed income, but here's $5."
Right.
Because they care and they want to see something different.
Right.
And it's really inspiring, actually.
There's some people that have different charity causes, and they always talk about money. And I know one of the fellows, I'm not going to name him, he said getting somebody sending me $5 an envelope means more than somebody sending me $20,000.
Absolutely.
Because that $5 meant more.
Something. Yep.
Really meant.
They felt it when they gave it to you.
That's someone who really feels it.
Yeah.
And that's what I can give you is $5.
Absolutely.
And that's good to know. Now, what about, we got a couple of things here, more local issues now, and that's the, we have a hot button topic here called the South Coast Rail Link. Okay, now that, the idea, I guess the concept is to get rail traffic, on a main line from Fall River, New Bedford to Boston.
Right.
Okay, now, and a novel idea, a wonderful idea, and one that, depending on who you talk to, can ring a lot of different ways. I know it's not very popular here because one of the routes that they were looking at is going right through Mansfield, which would cause major problems because we already have the high-speed link to New York, and then there's some other ones, and it's definitely it's a not in my backyard deal, but we're looking at infrastructure and everything else, and then some people look at it and say, do we really need to be spending this money right now on another state project? So I mean, is it an important project that we do this? Is it really an important thing?
Yeah, so I support the project as a whole.
Okay.
I think the routing is very important. I think you got to get that right.
Right.
And I can't say that I'm familiar enough with the various options. But
Okay.
obviously that's a key part. Just like when you build a highway, you have to make sure you're not running over people's front lawns. It's the same idea. You do it deliberately, you do it carefully,
Right.
you study it, and you look for the best route where you're going to interfere the least.
Right.
In general, I think it's a proper role of government to pay for transportation infrastructure. That is one of the things that a government really ought to do. To me, a rail system that makes sense and is economically viable is every bit as valuable as a road that would do the same thing as long as it had the same impact. So the folks, just like you were talking about that Arizona example, the people who are down in New Bedford and Fall River along the South Coast understand the impact that it would have.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm definitely supportive of the idea. Like I said, everything depends on execution.
Right.
Where you put it, how you do it.
No, I understand, and you got to look at the big picture. Is that the people down there that would use it really care about it.
That's right.
Boston would really care about it because it makes more access back and forth
Yeah.
to Boston, and it's the in between area.
Yeah,
it's
right.
like-
And you got to do it right.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that you're not hurting people here because
Right.
that kind of defeats the purpose of this.
Now, would
project.
you have anything to say about that when you're elected, or would you want to just at least want to be part of the process and look it over and see if you're encroaching on somebody? I mean,
Absolutely. If there's federal funding involved, I would have a very large role.
right. What do you
in
say
helping.
when they want to do this and yet the roads are falling apart? We need bridge repair, road repair,
Sure.
and how does that? I mean, I understand there's only so much water in the well,
Right.
but is new projects the way, or is fixing and rehabilitating what we have more of a priority, or
Well, the
both?
question is the question I would ask is, would we be able to do both if we cut back spending elsewhere? If we
Right.
weren't spending on unsustainable pensions, if we weren't, I mean, if you look at some of the projects that are going on at the state level, some of the programs that are being funded, they're ridiculous. And that's true at the federal level. So
Right.
let's get our priorities straight
Okay, so
and figure out where to put money in the first place. And then we can start having the argument that you're asking,
Right.
which is, it's a good set of questions. But my starting point would be, let's cut waste elsewhere and then spend appropriately.
Okay, very good. I'm going to borrow this for a second. We have part of our deal here is that our audience at the studio and abroad and out in the airwaves sends in questions, and I have a bunch of questions here, believe it or not. You have piqued a lot of people's
Good.
interest, so I have
That's
a
a
lot
good
of
thing.
questions, and I just generally, for anybody who has not seen the show before, these questions are written and copied in exact form from the people who send them in. Okay, we don't edit them or anything else, and I always show our guests these questions just prior to showing the show. These are not questions that I have written, and so we're going to just go down the list. This is just for new viewers who have never seen the show before. Okay, so the first thing is, it says, some have said that you are the first strong challenger to Barney Frank since Margaret Heckler in 1980. Do you feel this is a true statement?
Yes.
Okay, why?
Well, if you look at the election since then, in several cycles, Barney Frank hasn't had an opponent, so obviously those aren't very comparable. But if you look at the others, what you don't see is candidates who have raised an amount of money that would help them win and organized. So there was a candidate a couple of years ago who did well on the fundraising side, didn't qualify for the ballot. There have been a number of candidates who have qualified for the ballot but haven't been able to put together an organization. So we've done both those things. We have 3 offices. We have one in Norton, we have one in Newton, and we have one in Freetown. We just opened the one in Newton last night. It was packed. We had, it must have been 60 people in there, all ready to volunteer, to get involved, to make phone calls, to do all those things. To date, we've made more than 9,000 phone calls on behalf of the campaign.
None of them collect, right?
None of them collect.
Okay. Most of them do collect, but none of them collect.
Well, actually, they've been less fundraising and more gathering information, talking about our campaign, and recruiting volunteers.
Right.
And that's what it's all about. We have about 500 plus volunteers signed up. We have every day people in the office making calls. So all these things are making us a stronger campaign than anything that's been in the past. And of course, the political climate and the effect of Scott Brown's campaign are giving us a lot of wind in our sails.
Well, no,
as well.
the reason, because generally we get maybe 1, 2 questions for, you've got quite a few here, so I just go down the list here, and so you are piquing interest, and that's important, and I think in general, people such as yourself are piquing the interest in new blood. And I think the time is right, maybe for a little bit of a house cleaning or a correction.
Sure,
I mean,
right.
The real estate market has corrections, the stock market has corrections. Maybe it's time to have a correction in the government.
Right.
So that's what we're looking at now. You also have a Republican primary opponent in this race. Okay, how do you distinguish yourself between you and your opponent, and what's your message to Republican voters who would be looking to turn out in September for the primary?
Sure. Well, there's always 3 things you have to look at. First is issues, second is character, third is viability, likelihood of winning. On issues, like most Republicans, there is a lot of crossover. We have a lot of things in common in terms of issue positions. How we arrive at those issues, I think, is a little bit different. How we would reason through those problems is a little bit different. And anyone can go to both of our sites and take a look and read how we talk about the issues and make their own decisions based on that. I think values are indicated by how people live their lives, the things that they do and don't do. Again, there are pretty stark differences between us in terms of our personal conduct, in terms of the things that we've achieved, and in terms of the goals that we've set for ourselves. And again, people can do Google searches, they can look at our websites, and they can make those determinations for themselves.
And actually, we're gonna be kind enough to put your site up on our screen here.
SeanBielat.org.
Oh yeah, and info@SeanBielat.org.
Right, that's the email address, and SeanBielat.org.
Being a nonprofit, we can do that.
Good.
Okay.
And then finally is viability. My opponent's run 5 times before, never won. There's nothing that suggests that this time's going to be any different.
Okay.
There aren't funds. There aren't volunteers on his side. So really, it's just it's not even. It's not a fair contest at this point in time. Unless something were to change drastically, I don't see how he'd be a viable alternative.
Okay. Now here's a big question. So let's go this one. Barney Frank, while under fire from many for his involvement in the banking crisis, also we point to the meddling in his national security and some civil liberties. Under the Reagan administration, Frank led a successful effort to amend the Immigration and Nationality Act so that membership in a terrorist group was no longer sufficient to deny a visa. I mean, this is almost unthinkable post 9/11. And as someone with your military background, what are your thoughts on this issue? I mean, we did cover the border control and everything, but on that particular issue, what do you think about that? Is that
it's unbelievable that somebody would support that view.
It passed.
When you look at where we are right now, and when you look at the fact that I live in Brookline, like I mentioned, 4 blocks from my house last month, 4 blocks from my house, 2 guys were arrested because they'd been helping finance terrorist organizations.
Right.
Here in Mansfield, somebody was indicted not that long ago for a plot to kill 2 American politicians and shoot up a shopping mall and involvement with Al-Qaeda. These people are already here in our backyard. Now, why the heck would we want to enable more people to come in, legally no less, and to be here? And then you look at Israel.